The rain came down in sheets that night, turning the courtyard into a river of mud and fallen leaves. Behind the grand kitchen door of the Harding mansion, a young woman sat hunched on the cold stone steps, her thin jacket soaked through to her skin. In her trembling hands she held a small plastic container with leftover bread and a bit of cold soup. She ate quickly, desperately, her fingers shaking not just from the cold but from hunger that had gnawed at her stomach all day. Through the tall windows above her, warm golden light spilled out from the dining room where the family had just finished a feast that could have fed 10 people. But out here in the darkness and the rain, Natalie Brooks ate alone, her tears mixing with the raindrops on her cheeks. And watching from a window 3 floors up, a man in an expensive suit stood frozen, his wine glass forgotten in his hand, as something cracked open inside his chest that had been locked shut for years. Where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below, and please hit that subscribe button to support our growth as we bring you more incredible stories like this one. But to understand how we got to this heartbreaking moment, we need to go back to where it all started 3 months earlier, when Natalie first walked through the iron gates of the Harding estate with hope in her heart and a prayer on her lips. Natalie had not expected her life to turn out this way. Just 2 years ago, she had been a nursing student with dreams of becoming a pediatric nurse, working part-time at a small clinic while raising her 7-year-old son, Daniel, on her own. Daniel's father had left when the boy was just a baby, vanishing without a trace or a dollar of support. But Natalie had managed somehow, stretching every penny, studying late into the night after Daniel fell asleep, believing that hard work and determination would be enough to build a better future for them both. Then Daniel got sick. It started with tiredness that would not go away, then bruises that appeared for no reason, then fevers that spiked without warning. The diagnosis came like a thunderclap that shattered her world into pieces. Leukemia, childhood leukemia. The doctors said he needed treatment immediately, aggressive treatment that would cost more money than Natalie would earn in 5 years. Her insurance covered some of it, but not enough, never enough. The medical bills piled up like snow in a blizzard, burying her beneath their weight. She had to drop out of nursing school. She had to take any job she could find, working double shifts, triple shifts, anything to keep Daniel in treatment, to keep him alive. That was how she ended up at the Harding estate, applying for a position as a housemaid. The job posting had promised good pay, room and board, and medical benefits after 3 months of employment. 3 months. If she could just make it 3 months, the medical benefits would kick in and help cover Daniel's treatments. She could visit him on her days off at her sister's house where he was staying during his treatment. She could do this. She had to do this. The Harding estate was like something out of a storybook, but not the happy kind. It was one of those old, sprawling mansions that had been in the family for 4 generations, sitting on 20 acres of perfectly manicured grounds just outside the city. The house itself had 40 rooms, including a ballroom that had not been used in decades, a library with floor-to-ceiling shelves, and a dining room with a table that could seat 30 people. The current master of the house was Nathan Harding, a man in his 70s who had made his fortune in real estate and investments. He was rarely seen, spending most of his time in his study or away on business. His wife had passed away 10 years earlier, and his only child, his son Ryan, had died in a car accident 5 years ago, leaving behind a widow and a young grandson. The real power in the household, however, did not belong to Nathan Harding. It belonged to Patricia Whitmore, the head housekeeper who had worked for the family for 32 years. Patricia was a tall, thin woman in her late 50s with sharp features, gray hair pulled back in a tight bun, and eyes that seemed to see everything and forgive nothing. She ran the household staff with an iron fist, demanding perfection in every detail, from the way the towels were folded to the exact angle at which the curtains should be drawn. The other staff members, 3 maids, 2 cooks, a butler, and a groundskeeper, all walked on eggshells around her, terrified of making mistakes that would earn them her wrath. Natalie met Patricia on her first day in the servants' entrance at the back of the house. Patricia looked her up and down with cold, assessing eyes that made Natalie feel like an insect under a microscope. "You are the new girl," Patricia said. It was not a question. Her voice was crisp and sharp like scissors cutting through paper. "Natalie Brooks, correct?" "Yes, ma'am," Natalie said, trying to keep her voice steady. She needed this job too badly to let nervousness show. "I read your application," Patricia continued, walking slowly around Natalie in a circle, examining her from every angle. "You have no experience in household service. You were a nursing student before this. Why would someone with medical training want to work as a maid?" Natalie had prepared for this question. "I need steady employment with benefits, ma'am. I am a hard worker, and I am willing to learn whatever I need to know to do the job well." "Willing to learn?" Patricia repeated, her thin lips curving into something that was not quite a smile. Everyone who comes through that door is willing to learn, but this house demands more than willingness, it demands excellence. Mr. Harding expects his household to run like clockwork, and I make sure that happens. There is no room for mistakes here, Miss Brooks. None, do you understand? Yes, ma'am. You will start in the East Wing, handling the guest rooms and the upstairs sitting areas. I will inspect your work every day for the first month. If I find dust on a bookshelf, if I find a pillow out of place, if I find anything less than perfect, you will hear about it. 3 strikes and you are gone. Are we clear? Crystal clear, ma'am. Patricia stared at her for a long moment, her gray eyes boring into Natalie's with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. Then she turned on her heel and walked toward the main house, her shoes clicking sharply on the stone path. Follow me, I will show you to your room and give you your uniform. You start work in 1 hour. The servants' quarters were in a separate wing of the mansion, small plain rooms that were functional but far from comfortable. Natalie's room was barely bigger than a closet, with a narrow bed, a small dresser, and a single window that looked out onto the back gardens. But it was clean and dry and private, which was more than she had dared to hope for. She changed into the black dress and white apron that made up the maid's uniform, pulled her dark brown hair back into a neat bun, and reported for duty with 15 minutes to spare. The first week was exhausting. Natalie had never realized how much work went into maintaining a house this size. Every room had to be dusted, every surface polished, every carpet vacuumed, every window cleaned until it sparkled. The guest rooms in the East Wing had not been used in months, but they still had to be maintained as if they might receive visitors at any moment. Natalie worked from 6 in the morning until 8 at night, with only brief breaks for meals. Her hands grew raw from cleaning solutions, her back ached from bending and reaching, her feet throbbed from walking miles through endless hallways and up and down countless stairs. But she pushed through the exhaustion, driven by the image of Daniel's face that she carried in her mind like a talisman. Every night before she fell into bed, she called her sister Rachel to check on him. Rachel, who was only 23 and working 2 jobs of her own, had agreed to let Daniel stay with her during his treatment, taking him to his appointments, making sure he took his medicine, doing her best to keep his spirits up. On her first day off, Natalie took the bus across the city to Rachel's tiny apartment and spent precious hours with her son, reading him stories, playing simple games, holding him close and breathing in the scent of his hair. He looked so small and fragile, his skin pale, his eyes too large in his thin face. But he smiled when he saw her, and that smile gave her the strength to go back to the mansion and face another week of backbreaking work. Patricia watched Natalie's every move during those first weeks, appearing without warning to run her finger along a windowsill or inspect the corners of a room for dust. She found fault with almost everything Natalie did. The way she folded the towels was wrong. The way she arranged the decorative pillows on the beds was wrong. The way she swept the floors left streaks. Nothing was ever good enough, and Patricia made sure Natalie knew it. Her criticism delivered in that sharp, cutting voice that made every word feel like a slap. The other staff members offered Natalie sympathetic looks but little actual help. They had their own work to worry about, their own fear of Patricia's wrath. The only person who showed her any real kindness was Maria, one of the cooks, a warm-hearted woman in her 40s who had worked at the estate for 8 years. Maria would sometimes slip Natalie an extra sandwich or a piece of fruit, whispering encouragement when no one else was around. "Do not let Patricia get to you," Maria said one afternoon when Natalie was close to tears after a particularly harsh scolding. "She is like this with everyone at first. She is testing you, seeing if you will break. Just keep your head down, do your work, and do not give her any ammunition to use against you." Natalie tried to follow that advice, but it became harder as the weeks went on, because Patricia's treatment of her went beyond mere criticism. It started small. Natalie would clean a room perfectly only to come back an hour later and find something out of place, a vase moved, a rug askew, something that would make it look like she had done a sloppy job. Then Patricia would appear for her inspection, find the mistake, and mark it down as a strike against Natalie. Then items started going missing. A silver picture frame from one of the guest rooms, a crystal paperweight from the upstairs study, a set of antique bookends from the library. Each time something vanished, Patricia would conduct a search, and somehow the missing item would turn up in Natalie's room or in her cleaning cart, hidden where she would not have thought to look. And each time, Patricia would confront her in front of the other staff, accusing her of theft, threatening to call the police, only pulling back at the last minute with a warning that this was her final chance. Natalie protested her innocence, swore she had never taken anything, but her words fell on deaf ears. Patricia had worked for the Harding family for over 3 decades. She was trusted, respected beyond question. Natalie was just a new maid, an outsider, someone with no credentials and no connections. Who would believe her over Patricia? The other staff members started to avoid her, afraid that associating with her would put them under suspicion too. Even Maria kept her distance, though Natalie sometimes caught her looking with sad, sympathetic eyes. Natalie felt completely alone, trapped in a nightmare she could not wake up from, but she could not quit. She was only 6 weeks into her employment. She needed to make it to 3 months for the medical benefits. Daniel's next round of treatment was coming up and the bills were already piling higher. She had to endure, she had no choice. Then things got worse. Patricia started giving Natalie impossible tasks with unreasonable deadlines. She would assign her to clean an entire wing of the house in 2 hours, a job that would normally take 6. She would order her to polish all the silverware in the dining room, hundreds of pieces, and inspect it with a magnifying glass, sending her back to redo anything that showed the slightest imperfection. She would wake Natalie in the middle of the night, claiming there was an emergency cleaning needed, only to find fault with every aspect of the work and make her start over. Natalie's exhaustion grew deeper, settling into her bones like a disease. She lost weight because she was too tired to eat. Dark circles appeared under her eyes. Her hands shook from fatigue and stress. But still she kept going, counting down the days until the 3-month mark when the medical benefits would kick in and she could finally get help with Daniel's treatment costs. One evening, about 10 weeks into her employment, Patricia called Natalie to her office, a small room near the kitchen where she kept her records and schedules. Natalie went with a sense of dread, wondering what new accusation or impossible task awaited her. Patricia was sitting behind her desk, her face unreadable. "Sit down, Miss Brooks." Natalie sat, her heart pounding. "I have been reviewing your performance," Patricia said, tapping a folder on her desk. "And I am afraid it has been unsatisfactory. You have made numerous mistakes, failed to complete tasks on time, and there have been multiple incidents involving missing items from the house." "I never took anything," Natalie said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I swear I did not." "Your protestations are noted," Patricia said coldly. "However, the evidence speaks for itself. I have given you many chances, more than I would normally give, because I believe in being fair. But I cannot continue to overlook such poor performance. I am recommending to Mr. Harding that your employment be terminated." The words hit Natalie like a physical blow. "No, please, I only have 2 more weeks until my benefits start. My son, he is sick, he needs treatment. Please just give me 2 more weeks." "Your personal circumstances are not my concern," Patricia said. "The standards of this household are what matter. You have failed to meet those standards." Desperation clawed at Natalie's throat. "I will work harder, I will do anything, please do not fire me." Patricia stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. "My recommendation will go to Mr. Harding tomorrow. You will have his decision by the end of the week. You are dismissed." Natalie stumbled out of the office, barely seeing where she was going through the tears that blurred her vision. She made it to her room and collapsed on the narrow bed, sobbing into her pillow so no one would hear. After all her work, all her sacrifice, all the humiliation and mistreatment she had endured, it was going to be for nothing. She would be fired just days before qualifying for the benefits that could save her son's life. That night she could not sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through options that all led to dead ends. She could look for another job, but nothing else would pay enough or offer benefits fast enough. She could try to negotiate with the hospital, but she had already exhausted that option. She could ask her sister for more help, but Rachel was already stretched beyond her limits. There was no way out, no solution, no hope. Around midnight, her stomach started cramping with hunger. She had been too upset to eat dinner, and her last meal had been a small breakfast that morning. She knew there were leftovers in the kitchen from the family's dinner, food that would otherwise be thrown away. The staff were technically allowed to eat leftovers, though Patricia had made it clear she disapproved of the practice, calling it unprofessional. But Natalie was too hungry and too defeated to care about Patricia's approval anymore. She would be fired anyway. What did it matter? She crept down to the kitchen in the darkness, moving quietly so as not to wake anyone. The kitchen was large and industrial, with steel counters and professional-grade appliances. On the counter, she found a covered dish with some leftover chicken and vegetables. She started to take it back to her room, then realized she had no plate, no proper container. She just needed to eat something, anything, to quiet the gnawing pain in her stomach. She took the dish and a small container of soup and slipped out the back door into the courtyard, thinking she would sit on the steps and eat quickly before going back inside. But the moment she stepped outside, the sky opened up. Rain began to pour down in heavy sheets, drenching her within seconds. The courtyard flooded rapidly, turning into a shallow lake of mud and debris. Natalie should have gone back inside. Any sensible person would have, but something in her had broken that night. The rain felt like the universe itself crying for her, joining her in her grief and despair. She sat down on the cold stone steps, water pooling around her, and opened the container with shaking hands. She ate the cold food mechanically, barely tasting it, rain and tears mixing on her face. She felt small and worthless and completely alone in the world, just a woman sitting in the rain behind a mansion full of warmth and light that she would never truly be part of. She did not know that 3 floors above her, Ryan Harding stood at a window, unable to sleep, a glass of wine in his hand as he looked out at the storm. Ryan was Nathan Harding's grandson, the son of the man who had died 5 years ago. He was 32 years old, tall and lean with dark hair and intense gray eyes that missed very little. He had grown up in this house, left for college and then business school, built his own successful tech company in the city, and returned 2 years ago to help his aging grandfather manage the family's business interests. Ryan had a reputation for being brilliant but cold, a man who made decisions based on logic and profit rather than emotion. He had little patience for inefficiency or sentimentality. He ran his own company with the same iron discipline that Patricia ran the household staff, and he expected excellence from everyone around him. His personal life was equally controlled. He dated occasionally elegant women from good families but kept them at arm's length, never letting anyone get too close. His heart, people said, was locked up tighter than the vault in his office. He had been working late in his study, reviewing financial reports for one of the family's properties when he noticed the rain starting. He stood to close the window and happened to glance down at the courtyard below. That was when he saw her. A figure huddled on the steps in the pouring rain, barely visible in the darkness. At first he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. Then lightning flashed, illuminating the scene for just a moment, and he saw her clearly. A young woman in a soaked maid's uniform, eating from a container with trembling hands, her whole body shaking with cold or emotion or both. Ryan stood frozen, his wine glass forgotten. Something about the image struck him with unexpected force. The way she sat there, so small and vulnerable and alone, accepting the rain as if she deserved it, as if she had no right to seek shelter or warmth or comfort. It reminded him of something, though he could not immediately place what. Then it came to him. His mother, years ago, sitting in the garden after his father's funeral, just sitting in the rain because she said she could not feel anything else anymore. He set down his wine glass and left his study, moving quickly through the halls and down the stairs. He grabbed an umbrella from the stand by the door and went out into the courtyard, his expensive shoes splashing through puddles. Natalie looked up in shock as a shadow fell over her and the rain suddenly stopped hitting her face. She saw a man standing above her holding a large umbrella, his face partially obscured by darkness. "What are you doing out here?" Ryan asked, his voice sharp with something that was not quite anger. Natalie scrambled to her feet, nearly dropping the food container, her heart racing with panic. She recognized him now, Ryan Harding, the grandson, the heir to the family fortune. She had seen him around the estate but had never spoken to him directly. The staff were instructed to stay out of his way and never address him unless he spoke first. "I am sorry, sir," she stammered, water dripping from her hair and clothes. I was hungry and I did not want to eat inside and..." "You are the new maid," Ryan said, studying her face in the dim light from the kitchen windows. "Natalie, is that right?" "Yes, sir." "How long have you been sitting out here in the rain?" I do not know, sir, not long." Ryan looked at the container in her hands, at her soaked uniform, at the way she was shivering violently. His jaw tightened. "Come inside." "I am fine, sir, really." "That was not a request," Ryan said, his voice taking on a tone that made it clear he was not accustomed to being argued with. "Come inside right now." He turned and walked back toward the door, clearly expecting her to follow. Natalie had no choice but to obey, trailing after him like a scolded child. He led her through the kitchen and into a small sitting room that the family sometimes used for informal meals. He turned on a lamp, gestured for her to sit in one of the chairs, and disappeared for a moment, returning with a thick towel. "Dry off," he said, handing her the towel. Natalie took it with trembling hands and pressed it to her face and hair, acutely aware of the water dripping from her clothes onto the expensive carpet. Ryan stood watching her, his expression unreadable. "Why were you eating outside in a storm?" he asked. Natalie did not know how to answer. How could she explain the weight of despair that had driven her outside, the feeling that she did not deserve to be in the warmth with everyone else? I needed some air, sir." "Air," Ryan repeated flatly. You needed air in the middle of a thunderstorm." "Yes, sir." He studied her in silence for a long moment. Natalie kept her eyes down, not daring to meet his gaze. Finally, he spoke again. "How long have you worked here?" "Almost 11 weeks, sir." "And how do you find the work?" It was a simple question, but loaded with danger. If she complained, Patricia would hear about it and make her life even worse for however many days she had left. But if she lied and said everything was fine, she would be lying to a member of the family she worked for. "It is challenging, sir," she said carefully, "but I am doing my best." "Patricia runs a tight ship," Ryan said, "but the staff are generally well treated here. If you are having difficulties, you should speak up." The laugh that escaped Natalie's throat was bitter and entirely involuntary. She clapped her hand over her mouth, horrified, but it was too late. Ryan's eyes narrowed. "Something funny?" "No, sir, I apologize, that was inappropriate." "But you found something amusing about what I said." Natalie pressed her lips together, trying to hold back the words that wanted to spill out. But she was so tired, so defeated, so far past caring about consequences. "With respect, sir, speaking up does not help when no one believes you." "What does that mean?" And there it was, the moment where she could either retreat into safe silence or tell the truth that would probably get her fired even faster. She chose truth because what did she have to lose anymore? "Mrs. Whitmore has been sabotaging my work since I started," Natalie said quietly. "She plants evidence to make it look like I am stealing. She gives me impossible tasks and then marks me down when I cannot complete them. She has recommended that I be fired 2 weeks before my medical benefits would have started, which I need desperately because my 7-year-old son has leukemia and I cannot afford his treatment without help." The words hung in the air between them. Ryan's expression did not change, but something flickered in his gray eyes, something that might have been surprise or disbelief or calculation. "Those are serious accusations," he said finally. "Yes, sir." "Do you have any proof?" "No, sir, just my word against hers, and I know whose word carries more weight in this house." Ryan was silent for a long moment, his gaze never leaving her face. Natalie felt completely exposed, like he was reading every thought in her head, weighing and measuring her truth. "Go to your room," he said finally. "Get some dry clothes and some sleep. We will discuss this further tomorrow." Natalie stood up, still clutching the damp towel. "Yes, sir, thank you, sir." She turned to leave, then paused at the door, looking back at him. He was still standing in the same spot, his face thoughtful, his eyes distant. "Mr. Harding," she said softly. He looked at her. "Whatever happens, thank you for the umbrella, and for letting me come inside." She left before he could respond, making her way back to her tiny room in the servants' quarters. She changed into dry clothes and lay down on her narrow bed, but sleep would not come. Her mind kept replaying the conversation, wondering what Ryan Harding would do with what she had told him. Would he believe her? Would he investigate? Or would he simply dismiss her story as the complaints of a disgruntled employee and let Patricia's recommendation stand? She had no way of knowing that in the sitting room, Ryan was still standing in the same spot, his mind working through what he had just heard. He had built his business success on his ability to read people, to spot deception and truth with equal accuracy. And something in Natalie's eyes and the tired defeat of her voice had rung absolutely true. If what she said was accurate, then Patricia, the woman who had been part of his family's household since before he was born, had been systematically tormenting and sabotaging a young employee. And if that was true in Natalie's case, how many others had suffered the same treatment over the years? Ryan pulled out his phone and made a call despite the late hour. The head of his security team answered on the second ring. "I need you to pull all security footage from the mansion for the past 11 weeks, Ryan said without preamble. "Focus on the East Wing, the servants' quarters, and Patricia Whitmore's office. I am looking for anything that shows interaction between Whitmore and the new maid, Natalie Brooks. I want it on my desk by morning." He ended the call and stood looking out the window at the rain, which was finally beginning to slow. Something had shifted in him tonight, watching that young woman sit in the storm, eating cold leftovers as if she did not deserve better. He did not know yet what he was going to find in that footage, but he had a feeling that by tomorrow morning, things in the Harding household were about to change in ways that no one, least of all Patricia Whitmore, was prepared for. And 3 floors below, in her narrow room, Natalie finally fell into an exhausted sleep, unaware that the moment she had been seen in the rain had set in motion events that would transform not just her life, but the heart of the man who had seen her there. The morning came too quickly for Natalie. She woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway outside her door, the familiar shuffle and whisper of the other staff members beginning their day. For a moment she lay still, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince herself that last night had been a dream. But her clothes were still damp, draped over the chair by her window, and her body ached from sitting in the cold rain. It had all been real. She had told Ryan Harding everything, had accused Patricia of sabotage and cruelty, had exposed herself in a way that left her completely vulnerable. She sat up slowly, her muscles protesting. Whatever happened today, she would face it. She had survived worse. She had watched her son fight through rounds of chemotherapy that left him too weak to lift his head. She had worked 3 jobs at once to keep a roof over their heads. She could survive whatever Patricia Whitmore threw at her in retaliation for last night. She dressed in a clean uniform, pulled her hair back with extra care, and made her way to the kitchen for the morning staff meeting. This was Patricia's ritual, a daily gathering where she assigned tasks and inspected everyone's appearance before they were allowed to begin work. Natalie was usually the last to arrive, and today was no exception. She slipped into the kitchen just as Patricia was beginning her announcements. Patricia's eyes found Natalie immediately, and something cold and triumphant flickered in their depths. "How kind of you to join us, Miss Brooks. I trust you slept well." "Yes, ma'am," Natalie said quietly, taking her place at the back of the small group. "Excellent, because you have a very full day ahead of you. The entire West Wing needs to be cleaned from top to bottom. Mr. Harding's cousin is arriving tomorrow with her family, and they will be staying in the guest suites there. I expect every room to be spotless, every surface to shine. You have until 6 o'clock this evening to complete the work." The West Wing had 12 rooms. Even with help, it would take at least 2 full days to clean them properly. Alone, in less than 12 hours, it was impossible, but Natalie simply nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Patricia smiled, that thin, cruel smile that never reached her eyes. "Good, you may begin immediately after breakfast, and Miss Brooks, this will be your final test. If the work is not completed to my satisfaction, I will personally deliver your termination papers. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then we are all clear. Everyone else, your assignments are on the board, dismissed." The other staff members filed out quickly, avoiding Natalie's eyes. Maria paused for just a moment, long enough to squeeze Natalie's hand in silent sympathy, then she too hurried away. Only Patricia remained, studying Natalie with those calculating gray eyes. "You spoke with Mr. Ryan last night," Patricia said. It was not a question. Natalie's heart skipped a beat. How did she know? Had someone seen them? "He found me outside and told me to come in out of the rain." "How fortunate for you," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I hope you did not waste his time with complaints or excuses. Mr. Ryan has far more important matters to attend to than the grievances of a housemaid who cannot handle the demands of her position." "I understand, ma'am." "Do you?" Patricia took a step closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than a shout. "Let me make something perfectly clear to you, Miss Brooks. I have worked for this family for 32 years. I was here when Mr. Ryan was born. I helped raise him. I know every member of this household, and they trust me implicitly. You are nobody. You are a desperate woman with no skills and no options who was lucky enough to get hired when we needed extra help. If you think running to Mr. Ryan with wild accusations is going to save your job, you are sadly mistaken. Now get out of my sight and get to work." Natalie went. She collected her cleaning supplies and made her way to the West Wing, her hands shaking slightly as she pushed the supply cart down the long hallways. The West Wing was in the oldest part of the mansion, with high ceilings, ornate moldings, and windows that stretched from floor to ceiling. The rooms were beautiful but neglected, covered in a thick layer of dust because they were so rarely used. Cleaning them properly would require washing windows, scrubbing floors, dusting every surface including the intricate crown moldings, polishing furniture, and making up the beds with fresh linens. She started with the first room, working as quickly as she could without sacrificing quality. But by noon she had only finished 3 rooms and she was already exhausted. Her hands were raw from the cleaning solutions. Her back screamed from bending and stretching. She had skipped breakfast to start early, and now her stomach was cramping with hunger, but she did not dare take a break. If she was going to have any chance of finishing, she had to keep moving. Meanwhile, 3 floors above her, Ryan Harding sat in his study, his eyes fixed on the computer screen in front of him. His security chief had delivered the footage as requested, 11 weeks of recordings compiled into a series of files organized by date and location. Ryan had been watching for 3 hours, and what he was seeing made his blood run cold. The footage showed everything. Patricia moving items from rooms that Natalie had already cleaned, then conducting inspections and marking down mistakes. Patricia planting objects in Natalie's room and cleaning cart, small valuable items from various parts of the house. Patricia giving Natalie assignments with impossible deadlines, then berating her when she could not complete them. Patricia cornering Natalie in empty hallways, speaking to her with a venom that was shocking to witness, her usually controlled face twisted with malice when she thought no one was watching. But that was not all. Ryan kept watching, going back further in the timeline, and discovered that Natalie was not Patricia's first victim. Over the years, there had been others. A young man who had worked as a footman, dismissed after expensive cufflinks, went missing from Mr. Harding's room and were found in the footman's quarters. A maid who had been fired for persistent tardiness, though the footage showed Patricia deliberately giving her incorrect information about her schedule. Another maid who had quit after just 6 weeks, and the footage showed why. Patricia's campaign of psychological warfare driving the poor woman to tears on multiple occasions. Ryan sat back in his chair, a muscle working in his jaw. He had been so focused on running the family's business interests, so consumed with profit margins and investment strategies, that he had never paid attention to what was happening in his own household. He had trusted Patricia because his grandfather trusted her, because she had been part of the family for so long that questioning her seemed almost disloyal. But the evidence was undeniable. The woman who had helped raise him, who had been a fixture of his childhood, was systematically abusing the people under her authority. The question was what to do about it. Firing Patricia would be complicated. She had been with the family for over 3 decades. She knew everyone in their social circle. If he dismissed her without careful handling, she could cause problems, spread rumors, damage the family's reputation. But keeping her on was not an option, not after what he had seen. He made his decision and reached for his phone, calling his grandfather's private line. Nathan Harding answered after 3 rings, his voice rough with age but still sharp. "Ryan, what is it?" "Grandfather, I need you to come to my study. There is something you need to see." "I am in the middle of a conference call." "This cannot wait," Ryan said, his tone making it clear that he was not making a request. "Trust me." 30 minutes later, Nathan Harding sat in Ryan's study, his weathered face growing darker with each minute of footage he watched. He said nothing, but his hands gripped the arms of his chair with increasing force. When the compilation finally ended, he sat in silence for a long moment. "How long has this been going on?" Nathan asked finally, his voice rough. "Based on what I have found, at least 5 years, possibly longer." "And I never saw it, never suspected." Nathan shook his head, looking suddenly older than his 74 years. "Patricia has been with us since before your father was born. I trusted her completely." "She betrayed that trust," Ryan said flatly. "The question is what we do now." "We fire her immediately today." "I agree, but there is more we need to do. The current victim is a woman named Natalie Brooks. Patricia has been tormenting her for 11 weeks and has recommended her termination, which you were set to approve tomorrow." Nathan's jaw tightened. Obviously that will not happen. More than that, this woman has been working under impossible conditions while caring for a sick child. According to the file I pulled this morning, her 7-year-old son has leukemia. She took this job specifically for the medical benefits which she would have qualified for in 2 more weeks. Patricia timed her termination to prevent that. "That is monstrous," Nathan said quietly. "Yes, so here is what I propose." Ryan leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. "We fire Patricia this afternoon. We retroactively approve Natalie's medical benefits, effective immediately. We compensate her for the harassment she endured. And we conduct a full review of every staff member who has left in the past 10 years to see if there are others who deserve compensation or apology." Nathan nodded slowly. "Agreed, but Ryan, I want you to handle this personally. You found it, you follow through, make sure that young woman knows we take full responsibility for what happened to her." "I will." "And Ryan," Nathan stood, leaning heavily on his cane. "Thank you for paying attention. I should have seen this myself years ago. I failed in my responsibility to the people who work for us. That ends now." After his grandfather left, Ryan stood and straightened his tie, preparing himself for what came next. He called his secretary and instructed her to summon Patricia to his study immediately. Then he called the family's attorney to have termination papers drawn up. Finally, he called the household staff together, asking them to assemble in the main drawing room in 2 hours. He wanted them all present for what was about to happen. Down in the West Wing, Natalie had no idea that her life was about to change. She had finished 6 of the 12 rooms and was starting on the 7th when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Patricia standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, a look of cold satisfaction on her face. 6 rooms in 6 hours, Patricia said, walking slowly into the room and running her finger along the dresser. That means you have 6 more to complete in the next 6 hours, and yet here you are moving so slowly I could swear you were standing still. Perhaps you are hoping that if you fail you will gain some sympathy, some reprieve. I am working as fast as I can, ma'am, Natalie said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion dragging at her limbs. Not fast enough, Patricia said. She moved to the window that Natalie had just cleaned and deliberately smudged it with her palm, leaving a clear handprint. You missed a spot. Unacceptable. That is another mark against you. Natalie watched her do it, watched her sabotage the work with her own hands, and something inside her finally broke. Not broke in defeat, but broke free. What was the point of being silent anymore? She was going to be fired anyway. Let it be for speaking truth instead of accepting lies. Why do you hate me so much? Natalie asked quietly. Patricia's eyes narrowed. Excuse me. I have never done anything to you. I have worked hard, followed every rule, tried my best to meet your standards, but from the first day you have wanted me gone. Why? You are impertinent, Patricia said, her voice like ice. That is reason enough. No, Natalie said, taking a step forward. There is more to it than that. You have been setting me up to fail from the beginning, planting things in my room, sabotaging my work, giving me impossible tasks. Why? Because you do not belong here, Patricia said, and for the first time real emotion cracked through her controlled facade. You are not one of us. You are an outsider who came here with your sad story and your desperate circumstances, expecting special treatment, expecting us to feel sorry for you. But this household does not run on pity. It runs on discipline and order and people who understand their place. You have never understood yours. My place, Natalie repeated. You mean below you, beneath you, someone you can abuse because you have power and I do not. How dare you, Patricia began, but she was interrupted by a voice from the hallway. That is enough. Both women turned to see Ryan Harding standing in the doorway, his expression carved from stone. Behind him stood 2 security guards and the family's attorney. Patricia's face went pale. Mr. Ryan, I was just conducting a quality inspection. I said that is enough, Ryan repeated, his voice cutting through her words like a blade. Mrs. Whitmore, you need to come with me now. I do not understand, Patricia said, but her voice wavered. She understood perfectly. Natalie could see it in her eyes, the sudden fear, the realization that something had gone terribly wrong. My study now, Ryan turned to Natalie. Miss Brooks, please go to the main drawing room. Maria will show you where it is. The rest of the staff are gathering there. I will speak with you shortly. Natalie nodded, too shocked to speak. She watched as Patricia followed Ryan down the hallway, flanked by the security guards like a criminal being led away. The attorney brought up the rear, carrying a briefcase that surely contained nothing good for the woman who had tormented her for nearly 3 months. Maria appeared at her elbow, gently taking the cleaning supplies from her shaking hands. Come on, sweetheart, let me help you get cleaned up before we go to the drawing room. Whatever is happening, it looks like it is finally something good for you. In Ryan's study, Patricia stood with her back straight and her chin lifted, trying to maintain her dignity even as her world crumbled around her. Ryan sat behind his desk, a laptop open in front of him, the security footage queued and ready. I am going to make this very simple, Ryan said, his voice devoid of warmth. I have spent the morning reviewing security footage from the past 11 weeks. I have documented multiple instances of you sabotaging staff members, planting evidence, and engaging in systematic harassment. I have also found evidence suggesting this has been going on for years with multiple employees. Patricia's mouth opened and closed. Those recordings are taken out of context. There is no context that makes this acceptable, Ryan said, cutting her off. You have betrayed the trust this family placed in you, you have abused your position of authority, and you have caused real harm to people who had no power to defend themselves against you. He stood up and handed her an envelope. You are terminated effective immediately. This envelope contains your final paycheck, which includes 2 weeks severance pay, more than you deserve. Your belongings will be packed and delivered to the address on file within 3 days. You will leave this property within the hour and you will not return. If you attempt to contact any current staff members, if you attempt to interfere with this household in any way, we will pursue legal action. Are we clear? Patricia stared at him, her face cycling through shock, anger, and finally, desperate pleading. "Mr. Ryan, please, I have given 32 years to this family, your grandfather." "My grandfather is the one who approved your termination," Ryan said coldly. "He is as appalled by your behavior as I am. You have 1 hour. Security will escort you to your quarters and supervise your packing. Go." The security guard stepped forward. Patricia looked at Ryan for a long moment, and Natalie would have recognized the expression on her face. It was defeat, complete and total, the look of someone who had finally been caught and knew there was no escape. She left without another word. Ryan stood at the window, watching as the security team escorted her across the grounds toward the servants' quarters. His hands were clenched at his sides, anger still burning through him. But beneath the anger was something else, something he had not felt in a very long time. A sense that he had done something truly important, something that mattered beyond profit margins and business deals. He checked his watch. The staff would all be assembled by now, including Natalie. It was time to face them, to explain what had happened, and to begin making amends for what this family had allowed to occur under their roof. When he entered the main drawing room, he found the entire household staff waiting nervously. The butler, the groundskeeper, the 2 cooks including Maria, and the 3 maids including Natalie. They all stood when he entered, uncertain and afraid. "Please sit," Ryan said, gesturing to the chairs and sofas scattered around the elegant room. "What I have to say will take a few minutes." They sat slowly, exchanging confused glances. Natalie perched on the edge of a chair near the back, her uniform still dusty from her morning's work, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Ryan stood before them, his posture straight, his voice clear and carrying. "I have called you all here to inform you that Mrs. Patricia Whitmore has been terminated from her position effective immediately. She will not be returning to this household." A collective gasp went through the room. Maria's hand flew to her mouth. The butler David, who had worked alongside Patricia for 15 years, looked as though he had been struck. "The reason for her termination," Ryan continued, "is that I have discovered she has been engaging in systematic abuse of staff members, including sabotage, harassment, and false accusations. This behavior has been ongoing for years, affecting multiple employees." He paused, letting that sink in. Several of the staff members were nodding, tears in their eyes, as if a truth they had suspected but never dared speak aloud was finally being acknowledged. "My grandfather and I take full responsibility for not seeing this sooner," Ryan said. "We failed in our duty to provide a safe working environment. That failure ends today. I am conducting a full review of our household policies and procedures. I am also offering counseling services to anyone who feels they need support after dealing with Mrs. Whitmore's treatment." He turned his gaze to Natalie, who sat frozen, hardly daring to breathe. "Miss Brooks, I need you to remain after this meeting. The rest of you are excused from your duties for the remainder of the day. Take the time to process this news. We will reconvene tomorrow morning to discuss the transition to new management." The staff filed out slowly, still in shock. Maria squeezed Natalie's shoulder as she passed, whispering, "I knew someone would see it eventually. I am so glad it was him." Then they were gone, and Natalie was alone in the drawing room with Ryan Harding. He walked to the chair across from her and sat down, his elbows on his knees, his intense gray eyes focused on her face. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "Multiple apologies, in fact. First, for not believing you immediately last night. Second, for allowing Patricia's abuse to continue as long as it did. And third, for the system that made you feel you could not speak up without risking your job and your son's medical care." Natalie could not speak. Tears were streaming down her face, tears of relief and exhaustion and overwhelming emotion. She had been prepared for rejection, for termination, for more of the same cruelty she had endured for weeks. This acknowledgement and apology from someone with actual power was more than she had dared to hope for. "I have made several decisions regarding your employment," Ryan continued. "First, you will not be terminated. Your position is secure. Second, your medical benefits are approved effective immediately, not in 2 weeks. That should help with your son's treatment costs. Third, you will receive a bonus payment as compensation for what you endured, equivalent to 3 months' salary. And fourth, I am reassigning you from housemaid to a position that better utilizes your background." "You said you were a nursing student." Natalie nodded, wiping at her tears with the back of her hand. "I had completed 2 years before I had to drop out. My grandfather has been dealing with some health issues. Nothing serious, but his doctors have recommended he have someone with medical knowledge on staff to help manage his medications, monitor his blood pressure, that sort of thing. He has been resisting hearing a full-time nurse because he says it makes him feel old, but someone who could assist him while also helping to manage the household, that might be more acceptable. Would you be interested in such a position? Natalie stared at him in disbelief. You are offering me a job taking care of your grandfather? Yes, with a significant salary increase and full benefits starting immediately. You would have your own quarters in the main house rather than the servants' wing. And your son could come live with you here once his treatment is complete if you wished. We have plenty of room and the grounds are beautiful for a child to explore. I do not understand, Natalie whispered. Why are you doing this? Ryan was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Last night I saw you sitting in the rain, eating cold food as if you did not deserve better. And something about that image reminded me that we have a responsibility to the people who work for us, to treat them with dignity and respect, to see them as human beings and not just servants. My grandfather built this family's wealth on the principle of treating people fairly. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that in our own household. I am trying to find it again. He stood up and held out his hand. So what do you say, Miss Brooks? Will you accept the position? Natalie stood on shaking legs and took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, grounding. Yes, she said, her voice breaking. Yes, I accept. Thank you so much. Do not thank me yet, Ryan said with the ghost of a smile. My grandfather can be difficult, but I think you will be good for him, and I think this position will be good for you. He released her hand and walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. One more thing, you will need training on my grandfather's specific medical needs. That will take a few days to arrange. In the meantime, take tomorrow off, go see your son, spend time with him, and when you come back, we will start fresh. After he left, Natalie stood alone in the beautiful drawing room, surrounded by wealth and elegance that had seemed so far beyond her reach just hours ago. She thought about Daniel, about being able to tell him that his treatments would continue, that she could afford his medications, that everything was going to be okay. She thought about the future, about having her son with her again, about working in a position that used her skills and education instead of just her ability to clean. And she thought about Ryan Harding, the cold, distant billionaire who had seen her in her moment of deepest despair and had actually done something about it. But what Natalie did not know, what she could not possibly know yet, was that Ryan himself was struggling with emotions he did not fully understand. Back in his study, he stood at the window looking out at the grounds, his mind full of the image of her in the rain. There had been something about her vulnerability, her quiet dignity even in her suffering, that had reached past all his carefully constructed walls and touched something deep inside him that he had thought was dead. He told himself it was just sympathy, just the natural response of any decent person seeing someone treated unfairly. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that it was something more, something dangerous, something that could complicate everything if he was not very, very careful. He pushed the thought away and returned to his desk. There was work to do, policies to review, a household to reorganize. He did not have time for complicated emotions. He would help Natalie Brooks because it was the right thing to do, because she deserved better than what she had received, nothing more. But that night, as he tried to sleep, his mind kept returning to the moment when she had taken his hand, when her brown eyes had looked up at him with such profound gratitude and relief that it had felt like being struck by lightning. And he wondered just for a moment what it would be like to see that look on her face again, but for different reasons, better reasons. Then he forced himself to stop thinking about it and focus on sleep. Tomorrow would be a busy day. There was no room in his life for distractions, no matter how compelling they might be. But 3 floors below, in her small room in the servants' quarters that she would soon be leaving, Natalie lay awake with her phone pressed to her ear, talking to her son. "Mommy has good news, baby," she said softly. "Everything is going to be okay now. Your treatments can continue, and soon, very soon, you are going to come live with me in a beautiful house with gardens where you can play. Would you like that?" Daniel's weak but happy voice came through the phone. "Really, Mommy, you promise?" "I promise, sweetheart. Everything is going to be better now, I promise." And as she said it, she looked up at the ceiling, thinking about the man 3 floors above her, wondering if he had any idea how completely he had changed her life in the space of a single day. Wondering if she would ever be able to adequately thank him for seeing her when she felt invisible, for believing her when she expected to be dismissed, for giving her hope when she had none left. 3 weeks passed like a dream that Natalie kept expecting to wake up from. But every morning she opened her eyes in her new room in the main house, a space 3 times larger than her previous quarters, with a real window that looked out over the rose gardens and furniture that was not just functional but actually beautiful. Every morning she reminded herself that this was real, that her life had truly changed, that she was no longer scrubbing floors and hiding from Patricia's cruelty. Her new position as Nathan Harding's medical assistant and household coordinator kept her busy, but in a completely different way. She spent her mornings with the elderly man, helping him organize his medications, checking his blood pressure and blood sugar levels, accompanying him on his daily walks through the gardens that his doctor had prescribed for his heart health. Nathan had been suspicious of her at first, gruff and resistant to what he called being Bobbied. But Natalie had a gentle way with him, never pushy or condescending, treating him with respect while still making sure he followed his medical routines. "You are sneaky," Nathan had told her one morning during their second week together, but there was warmth in his voice. "You make me think I am making my own decisions, but somehow I end up doing exactly what the doctors ordered." "I have no idea what you mean, Mr. Harding," Natalie had replied with an innocent smile, handing him his morning pills with a glass of water. He had laughed, actually laughed, and taken the pills without complaint. From that moment on, they had developed an easy rapport. Nathan started telling her stories about the family, about building his business empire from nothing, about his late wife Margaret, who he still missed every single day. Natalie listened and shared carefully selected stories of her own, about Daniel's bravery during his treatments, about her dreams of finishing her nursing degree someday. In the afternoons, she worked with David the butler to coordinate the household staff. With Patricia gone, the entire atmosphere of the mansion had changed. The remaining staff members seemed lighter, happier, more willing to speak up with ideas or concerns. Maria had been promoted to head cook and was thriving in her new authority. A new housekeeper had been hired, a kind woman named Helen who believed in firm standards but treated everyone with basic human decency. And through it all, Natalie was acutely aware of Ryan Harding. He was everywhere and nowhere, a presence that seemed to fill the house even when he was locked away in his study working. She saw him at breakfast sometimes, sharing coffee with his grandfather while reviewing business papers. She passed him in hallways, their eyes meeting briefly before they both looked away. She heard his voice through closed doors, talking on the phone about mergers and acquisitions and things she did not fully understand but found fascinating anyway. He was unfailingly polite to her, asking after Daniel's progress, inquiring if she had everything she needed, thanking her for the care she was providing his grandfather. But there was a distance in his manner, a careful formality that reminded her constantly of the vast gap between their worlds. He was a billionaire, the heir to fortune, a man who moved in circles of power and influence. She was a former nursing student who had been scrubbing toilets just weeks ago. The kindness he had shown her did not change the fundamental reality of who they were to each other. Except sometimes, when she caught him looking at her, she thought she saw something in his gray eyes that was not just polite interest. Something that made her heart beat faster and her cheeks flush with warmth. But then he would look away, and she would tell herself she was imagining things, projecting her own growing feelings onto a man who was simply being a decent employer. Because she was developing feelings she had no business having. She found herself thinking about him at odd moments, remembering the way he had stood in the rain with an umbrella, the way his voice had been gentle when he apologized to her, the way his hand had felt when she shook it in the drawing room. She thought about the intelligence in his eyes, the way his rare smiles transformed his serious face, the dedication he showed to fixing the problems in his household once he became aware of them. She knew it was foolish, she knew nothing could come of it, but her heart did not seem to care about logic or social boundaries. Her heart had decided, somewhere in those rain-soaked moments 3 weeks ago, that Ryan Harding was someone special, someone worth caring about, someone who had awakened something in her that had been dormant for years. Meanwhile, Ryan was fighting his own battle, though Natalie had no way of knowing it. He had thrown himself into work with even more intensity than usual, taking on new projects, scheduling back-to-back meetings, doing anything to keep his mind occupied and away from dangerous thoughts. But no matter how busy he kept himself, his attention kept drifting to Natalie. He found excuses to walk past the sitting room where she had her morning sessions with his grandfather, just to hear the sound of her laughter mixing with the old man's gruff chuckles. He timed his breakfast to coincide with hers, telling himself it was just efficient use of time, but knowing deep down he simply wanted to see her. He asked his grandfather about her progress far more often than was strictly necessary, hungry for any information about her life, her thoughts, her feelings. It was ridiculous. He was 32 years old, not some teenager with a crush. He had dated plenty of women, beautiful, accomplished women from appropriate families. None of them had affected him the way Natalie did. None of them had made him feel this constant pull, this need to be near her, to make her smile, to see that look of gratitude and trust in her brown eyes. But she worked for him. She depended on him for her livelihood, for her son's medical care. Any romantic advance from him would be inappropriate at best, coercive at worst. He had given her safety and security after months of abuse. He could not jeopardize that by acting on feelings that were probably just a temporary fascination anyway. He needed to maintain professional distance, needed to keep their relationship strictly employer and employee. He told himself this over and over, a mantra that was supposed to keep him in line. But then something happened that shattered his careful control. It was a Thursday afternoon, nearly 4 weeks after Patricia's termination. Natalie had driven into the city for Daniel's weekly treatment appointment, something she did every Thursday with Ryan's explicit permission and a car from the family's fleet at her disposal. She usually returned by evening, tired but happy from spending time with her son. But this Thursday, Ryan received a phone call at 6:30 that made his blood run cold. It was the hospital, and the nurse on the line was asking for the emergency contact for Natalie Brooks. There had been an accident. Ryan was in his car and driving toward the city before he fully processed what he was doing. He called his assistant to get more details, learned that Natalie's car had been hit by a drunk driver 3 blocks from the hospital. She had been taken to the emergency room. Daniel had not been in the car, thank God. He was still at the hospital receiving his treatment when it happened. The drive felt like it took hours instead of 40 minutes. Ryan's hands gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckle force, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios. She could be seriously hurt. She could be dying. And the last conversation they had been that morning at breakfast, a polite exchange about his grandfather's medication schedule, nothing of substance, nothing that mattered. When he finally reached the hospital and made his way to the emergency room, he found Natalie sitting on an examination bed in one of the curtained areas, looking small and shaken but miraculously unharmed. A doctor was checking her pupils with a light, asking her questions about dizziness and nausea. "I am fine," Natalie was saying, her voice strained. "Really, I just want to see my son, he must be so scared." "Miss Brooks needs to be monitored for a few more hours," the doctor said firmly. "She hit her head in the collision. Concussion protocol requires observation." "I do not have a concussion," Natalie protested. "I barely bumped my head, please, my son." "Your son is with your sister in the pediatric ward," a nurse interjected gently. "He is fine, honey. He does not even know about the accident. We told him you were delayed in traffic." That was when Ryan stepped through the curtain. Natalie's eyes went wide with shock. "Mr. Harding, what are you doing here?" "The hospital called me as your emergency contact," Ryan said, moving to her side without thinking. "Are you all right? The doctor said you hit your head." "I am fine," Natalie said again, but her hands were shaking where they clutched the thin hospital blanket. "The airbag deployed and I bumped my head a little, but I am fine. You did not need to come all the way down here." "Of course I did," Ryan said, and there was something in his voice that made the doctor and nurse exchange meaningful glances before quietly excusing themselves. Ryan pulled up a chair and sat beside the examination bed, his eyes searching Natalie's face for signs of injury. There was a small bruise forming on her temple and her pupils looked normal, but she was pale and trembling with delayed shock. "Tell me what happened," he said gently. "I was leaving the hospital parking garage," Natalie said, her voice starting to shake. "I was thinking about Daniel, about how well his treatment went today, and then out of nowhere this car just slammed into my side. Everything happened so fast. The airbag exploded and there was glass everywhere and I could not breathe for a second. But then people were there helping me out of the car, calling ambulances. The other driver, they said he was drunk. In the middle of the afternoon, drunk and driving." Her voice broke on the last word and suddenly she was crying, all the fear and adrenaline she had been holding back finally overwhelming her. Without thinking, Ryan stood and wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against his chest. She stiffened for just a moment, then collapsed against him, sobbing into his expensive suit jacket. "It is okay," Ryan murmured, one hand stroking her hair. "You are safe, Daniel is safe, everything is okay." "I could have died," Natalie choked out. "I could have died and left Daniel alone. He has already lost his father and he almost lost me today. What would happen to him? Who would take care of him?" "That did not happen," Ryan said firmly, pulling back just enough to look into her tear-streaked face. "You are here, you are safe, and Daniel is never going to be alone, I promise you that." "How can you promise that?" Natalie whispered. "You barely know us." Ryan looked at this woman who had been through so much and still found the strength to keep going, who loved her son with a fierceness that took his breath away, who had somehow worked her way past every defense he had ever built and planted herself firmly in his heart. And he knew in that moment that he was done pretending, done keeping distance, done lying to himself about what he felt. "I know enough," he said quietly. "I know you are the bravest person I have ever met. I know you would do anything for your son. I know you make my grandfather laugh in a way he has not laughed since my grandmother died. And I know that the thought of something happening to you terrified me in a way nothing else has in years." Natalie stared at him, her brown eyes wide and uncertain. "Mr. Harding." "Ryan," he interrupted, "please, just Ryan." "Ryan," she repeated softly, testing his name on her tongue. "I do not understand what you are saying." "I am saying that you matter to me," Ryan said, his hand still cradling her face, his thumb gently wiping away her tears. "More than you should, more than is probably appropriate, but I cannot seem to help it. When I got that call from the hospital, all I could think was that I needed to get to you, needed to make sure you were okay. Does that make sense?" "No," Natalie whispered, "because you are you and I am just." "Do not," Ryan said sharply. "Do not diminish yourself. You are not just anything. You are extraordinary, Natalie. Do you have any idea how rare it is to find someone with your strength, your kindness, your ability to keep hopping even when everything seems hopeless?" "You gave me that hope," Natalie said, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "You saved me when I had nothing left. How am I supposed to know if what I feel is real or just gratitude?" The question hung in the air between them. Ryan let his hand fall away from her face, taking a step back, giving her space. "You are right," he said finally. "This is not the time for this conversation. You have been through a trauma, your emotions are running high, we should wait until—" "I think about you constantly," Natalie interrupted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Every day, every moment. I tell myself I am being foolish, that nothing could ever happen between us, that you are just being kind to someone who works for you. But then I catch you looking at me, and I think maybe possibly you might feel something too. And it terrifies me because I have Daniel to think about, and I cannot afford to make mistakes or jeopardize the security you have given us. But sitting in that car today, thinking I might die, all I could think was that I would never get to tell you that you changed my life in every possible way, and not just because of the job or the money. You made me feel seen again. You made me feel like I mattered." Ryan stared at her, his careful control crumbling. "You do matter, you matter more than—" He was interrupted by voices outside the curtain. The doctor returned with a nurse checking Natalie's chart, asking more questions about her symptoms. The moment broke and Ryan stepped back, putting proper distance between them again. But something had shifted, something fundamental. The truth was out in the open now, hanging between them like a living thing. After the doctor confirmed that Natalie could be released with instructions to rest and watch for concussion symptoms, Ryan made arrangements. He called Rachel and explained the situation, assuring her that Natalie was fine and would come to pick up Daniel soon. He dealt with the police report and insurance paperwork. He arranged for the damaged car to be towed and for a replacement vehicle to be delivered to the hospital. He did all of this with his usual efficiency, but part of his mind was still reeling from Natalie's confession, from the knowledge that she felt the same impossible pull that he did. An hour later, they were in Ryan's car, driving to Rachel's apartment to collect Daniel. Natalie sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the darkening city, her hands folded in her lap. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken words. "We need to talk about this," Ryan said finally, "but not tonight. Tonight you need to be with your son, need to rest and recover. But Natalie, we need to figure out what this is between us." "I know," she said softly, "but I am scared." "Of what?" "Of losing everything again, of making the wrong choice, of dragging Daniel into something complicated." She turned to look at him, her eyes glistening in the dim light from the dashboard. "And I am scared of how much I feel for you after such a short time. It does not seem possible, does it, to care about someone this much after just a few weeks?" "I do not know what is possible anymore," Ryan admitted. "All I know is that when I thought you might be hurt, nothing else mattered, not work, not reputation, not social expectations, just getting to you." They reached Rachel's apartment building, a modest complex in a middle-class neighborhood. Natalie unbuckled her seatbelt but did not move to get out of the car. "If we do this," she said quietly, "if we try to figure out what this is, it cannot just be about us. It has to be about Daniel too. He is my whole world, Ryan. I will not let anything hurt him, even something that makes me happy." I would never want to hurt him, Ryan said, or you. I know, but sometimes people hurt each other without meaning to. Sometimes circumstances hurt people even when everyone has good intentions. She reached for the door handle, then paused and looked back at him. Give me a few days, let me spend time with Daniel, process what happened today, think about what happens next. Can you do that? Of course, Ryan said, even though the thought of days without seeing her felt unbearable. Take all the time you need. Natalie nodded and got out of the car. Ryan watched her walk into the building, watched until she disappeared from view. Then he sat there for a long moment, his hands on the steering wheel, his mind spinning with everything that had happened. He had built his entire life on control, on careful planning, on making logical decisions based on facts and analysis. But there was nothing logical about what he felt for Natalie Brooks. It was messy and complicated and potentially disastrous. She worked for him, she was vulnerable, she had a child to consider. Every rational part of his brain screamed that he should back away, maintain professional distance, forget about the way she had felt in his arms or the look in her eyes when she said she thought about him constantly. But his heart, that locked up, frozen thing that he thought had died years ago, was screaming even louder. It was telling him that Natalie was worth the risk, worth the complications, worth throwing away every careful rule he had ever made for himself. It was telling him that what he felt was not going to go away just because he ignored it, that this woman had somehow become essential to him in a way he did not fully understand but could not deny. Inside Rachel's apartment, Natalie was wrapped in her son's thin arms, holding him close and breathing in the scent of his hair. Daniel was chattering happily about his day, about the nurse who had let him pick a prize from the treasure box, about the dog he had seen in the hospital lobby. He had no idea how close he had come to losing his mother today, and Natalie was grateful for that innocent ignorance. But as she held him, as Rachel watched with knowing eyes from across the room, Natalie's mind was full of Ryan Harding. She kept replaying his words, the way he had held her, the intensity in his gray eyes when he said she mattered to him. She had spent so many years being invisible, being overlooked, being treated as less than. And here was a man who saw her, truly saw her, who looked at her like she was precious and rare and worth something. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. "Mommy," Daniel pulled back to look at her face. "Why are you crying?" Natalie had not realized she was. She wiped at her cheeks and smiled. "Happy tears, baby, just happy tears because I get to hold you." "Rachel said you were in a car accident. Did it hurt?" "Just a little bump," Natalie assured him. "Nothing serious. The car is fine. I am fine. Everything is fine." But as she said it, she wondered if anything would ever really be fine again. Because her heart had made a choice today, sitting in that hospital room, listening to Ryan's voice crack with emotion. Her heart had chosen him, had decided he was worth the risk, worth the fear, worth whatever complications might come. The question was whether she would be brave enough to follow where her heart was leading, or whether fear would win, as it had so many times before, keeping her safe but alone. Later that night, after Daniel had fallen asleep in Rachel's guest room, the two sisters sat together in the small living room, cups of tea growing cold between them. "So," Rachel said, her voice careful, "you want to tell me about this Ryan Harding, because the way you talked about him on the phone and the way he apparently dropped everything to rush to the hospital does not sound like a normal boss-employee relationship." Natalie buried her face in her hands. "I do not know what it is. I do not know what I am doing. All I know is that I feel something for him and he seems to feel something for me, and it is completely insane." "Why is it insane?" Rachel asked gently. "You are both single adults. He clearly cares about you. What is wrong with that?" "Everything," Natalie said. "He is a billionaire, Rachel. He lives in a different world, and I work for him, which makes any kind of relationship complicated and potentially problematic. Plus, I have Daniel to think about. What if I let myself fall for Ryan and it does not work out? What if Daniel gets attached to him and then loses another important person? My son has been through enough pain. I cannot add more." "But what if it does work out?" Rachel countered. "What if this is your chance at real happiness? You have been alone for so long, Natalie. You have been fighting and struggling and sacrificing. Maybe it is time to let someone else help carry the weight. Maybe it is time to let yourself be happy." "I do not know how," Natalie whispered. "I have been in survival mode for so long, I have forgotten what it feels like to just live." Rachel reached over and squeezed her sister's hand. "Then maybe it is time to remember. Maybe this man who sees you, who values you, who rushed to your side when you needed him, maybe he is supposed to help you remember. Back at the mansion, Ryan stood in his study looking out the window at the gardens below, illuminated by soft landscape lighting. His phone buzzed with messages, business associates wanting his input on deals and investments. But he ignored them all, his mind full of Natalie's face, her tears, her confession that she thought about him constantly. His grandfather appeared in the doorway, leaning on his cane, his weathered face concerned. "I heard about the accident. Is Natalie all right?" "She is fine," Ryan said, shaken up but not seriously hurt. "And you went to the hospital yourself," Nathan said. It was not a question. "I did." Nathan was quiet for a moment, studying his grandson with shrewd eyes that saw more than Ryan would have liked. "You care about her?" "Yes." "More than you should, perhaps, given your respective positions." Ryan turned to face his grandfather fully. "Probably, but I do not seem to be able to help it." Nathan moved into the room and settled into one of the leather chairs with a grunt. "Let me tell you something about your grandmother, boy. Margaret came from nothing. Her father was a factory worker. She had holes in her shoes and wore the same dress 3 days in a row. When I first saw her, she was serving coffee in a diner where I stopped during a business trip, and I took one look at her smile and knew my life had just changed forever." Ryan had heard this story before, but never in this context. He sat down across from his grandfather, listening. "Everyone told me I was crazy," Nathan continued. "My parents were horrified. My business partners said it would ruin my reputation, but I did not care. I knew Margaret was special, knew she was worth more than all their opinions combined. So I pursued her, and eventually she agreed to marry me, and we had 52 years together before she passed. Best 52 years of my life. You know why?" "Why?" Ryan asked quietly. "Because she saw me," Nathan said. "Not my money, not my status, just me. She loved the man, not the fortune. And in a world where everyone wants something from you, having someone who just wants you, that is priceless. So if Natalie makes you feel seen, if she makes you feel like you matter beyond your bank account and your last name, then do not let fear or propriety or anything else stop you from pursuing that. Life is too short to spend it alone when you have found someone worth being with." Ryan felt something loosen in his chest, a knot of tension he had been carrying for weeks. "What if I mess it up? What if I hurt her?" "Then you will have to live with that," Nathan said bluntly. "But you will also have to live with letting her go without even trying. Which regret do you think you could bear more easily?" It was a good question, one Ryan already knew the answer to. He would rather risk everything and fail than spend the rest of his life wondering what might have been. "She asked for a few days," Ryan said, "to think about things, to consider her son." "That is wise of her," Nathan said. "Daniel needs to be her first priority. But Ryan, when those few days are up, when she is ready to talk, do not hide behind formality or distance. Tell her the truth, tell her how you feel, give her the choice, and then respect whatever she decides." "What if she decides it is too complicated? What if she chooses safety over taking a risk?" "Then you accept that with grace," Nathan said. "But I do not think she will. I see the way she looks at you when she thinks no one is watching. That young woman has feelings for you too, grandson. The question is whether you are both brave enough to act on them." After his grandfather left, Ryan remained in his study, thinking about bravery and risk and choices. He had always been brave in business, willing to make bold moves, to invest in uncertain ventures, to gamble on his instincts. But in his personal life, he had been cautious to the point of cowardice, keeping everyone at arm's length, never letting anyone get close enough to hurt him. Natalie had somehow slipped past all those defenses without even trying, and now he had a choice to make. He could retreat back into safety, back into the controlled, sterile existence he had built for himself, or he could step forward into uncertainty, into vulnerability, into the terrifying possibility of real connection with another human being. He thought about the way Natalie had felt in his arms at the hospital, the way her tears had soaked into his shirt, the way her voice had broken when she said she thought about him constantly. He thought about her strength and her kindness and her fierce love for her son, and he knew with absolute certainty that she was worth the risk, worth any risk. The question now was whether she would decide the same about him. 3 days she had asked for, 3 days to think and process and consider what came next. He would give her that time, would respect her need for space and clarity. But when those 3 days were up, when she was ready to talk, he would be honest with her in a way he had never been honest with anyone. He would lay his heart bare and let her decide what to do with it. And whatever she decided, he would accept it, because that was what you did when you truly cared about someone. You gave them the power to choose, even if their choice broke your heart. Outside, the moon rose higher in the sky, casting silver light across the grounds. And in two different places across the city, two people lay awake, thinking about each other, wondering about the future, and trying to find the courage to reach for something real in a world that so often felt false. The next 3 days would determine everything, and neither of them had any idea just how much their lives were about to change. The 3 days felt like 3 years. Natalie spent them with Daniel, reading him stories, playing board games, sitting beside him during his treatment sessions, and holding his hand when the nausea got bad. Rachel had taken time off work to help, cooking meals and doing laundry and giving Natalie space to think when she needed it. But no amount of distraction could quiet the constant hum of thoughts about Ryan Harding that filled every corner of her mind. She kept replaying their conversation at the hospital, analyzing every word, every look, every touch. Part of her was convinced she had imagined the depth of emotion in his voice, that she had misread everything because she wanted so badly for it to be real. But another part of her, the part that had felt his arms around her and seen the fear in his eyes when he thought she was hurt, knew she had not imagined anything. He felt something for her, something real and powerful and as confusing to him as her feelings were to her. The question was what to do about it. On the second day, she talked to Daniel. Really talked to him in the way she had learned to do since his diagnosis, treating him not as a baby but as a person who deserved honesty appropriate to his age. They were sitting on Rachel's couch, Daniel leaning against her side, a cartoon playing on the television that neither of them was really watching. "Baby, can I ask you something?" Natalie said softly. "Sure, Mommy." "How would you feel if Mommy had a friend, someone special, someone who might spend time with us sometimes?" Daniel looked up at her with those big eyes that saw more than most 7-year-olds. "You mean like a boyfriend?" Natalie felt her cheeks heat. "Maybe, eventually, would that be okay with you?" Daniel was quiet for a moment, thinking, "Is it Mr. Ryan, the man with the big house where we are going to live?" Natalie's breath caught. "How did you know about him?" "Aunt Rachel told me about him. She said he was really nice to you and helped us a lot. And she said he came to the hospital when you got in the accident, even though he did not have to. That means he likes you, right?" "I think so, yes. Does that bother you?" Daniel shook his head. "I just want you to be happy, Mommy. You are sad a lot even when you try to hide it. If Mr. Ryan makes you happy, then I think that is good." Natalie pulled him closer, tears stinging her eyes. "When did you get so wise?" "I am 7 3/4, Daniel said seriously. "That is pretty old." "Very old," Natalie agreed, kissing the top of his head. "And what about you? How would you feel about having someone new in our lives?" Daniel was quiet again, and Natalie could practically see the wheels turning in his young mind. "I do not really remember having a daddy," he said finally. "I know I had one, but he left before I could remember, so I do not know what it is supposed to be like. But if Mr. Ryan is nice to you and nice to me, maybe it could be good to have someone else who cares about us." The simple wisdom of it took Natalie's breath away. Her son, who had been through so much pain and uncertainty, was still willing to open his heart to the possibility of something new. If he could be that brave, surely she could too. On the third day, Natalie made her decision. She called the mansion and asked to speak with Ryan. His secretary put her through immediately, and the sound of his voice on the line made her heart race. "Natalie, how are you feeling? How is Daniel?" "We are both good," she said. "I am ready to talk if you are. Can we meet somewhere, maybe not at the mansion, somewhere more private?" There was a pause, and she could almost hear him thinking. "There is a park near the estate about 2 miles south. It has walking trails and a lake. Would that work?" "That sounds perfect. When?" "I can be there in an hour." "I will see you then." After she hung up, Natalie stood staring at her phone for a long moment, her stomach fluttering with nerves. Rachel appeared in the doorway, a knowing look on her face. "You are going to see him?" "Yes." "Good, it is about time, and Natalie, do not talk yourself out of this. You deserve happiness. Let yourself have it." An hour later, Natalie stood at the edge of a beautiful park, watching the afternoon sun sparkle on the surface of a small lake. Trees lined the walking paths, their leaves just beginning to turn with the first hints of autumn. It was peaceful and private. Exactly the kind of place where people could have difficult conversations without interruption. She saw Ryan before he saw her. He was walking toward her from the parking area, dressed casually in jeans and a dark sweater that made his gray eyes seem even more intense. Her heart did that strange fluttering thing again, and she took a deep breath to steady herself. He spotted her and his pace quickened, closing the distance between them. When he reached her, they stood for a moment just looking at each other, both uncertain how to begin. "Thank you for meeting me," Natalie said finally. "Of course, how are you really?" "I am okay, a little sore, but nothing serious. The bruise on my head is already fatting." She gestured toward a bench near the water. "Should we sit?" They walked to the bench in silence and settled at opposite ends, leaving space between them. Natalie folded her hands in her lap, gathering her courage. "I have been thinking a lot over the past 3 days," she began, "about what happened at the hospital, about what we said to each other, and I need to be completely honest with you about where I am and what I am feeling, even though it scares me." "I am listening," Ryan said quietly. "I have feelings for you," Natalie said, the words coming out in a rush. "Real feelings, not just gratitude or admiration, but actual romantic feelings that make me think about you constantly and miss you when you are not around and imagine what it would be like to be with you. And I know that is complicated because you are my employer and because of the difference in our circumstances, and because I have Daniel to consider. But I also know that if I do not at least try to explore this, if I let fear stop me from taking a chance, I will regret it for the rest of my life." She paused, trying to read his expression, but his face was carefully neutral. She pressed on. "But I need you to understand something. Daniel is my priority always. He has to be. He has been through so much, and I will not put him through more pain or instability unless I am absolutely certain it is worth it. So if we do this, if we try to see where this goes, it has to be real. It cannot be some kind of experiment or temporary thing. I need to know you're serious about me, about us, about the possibility of building something that includes my son." She finished and sat back, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Ryan was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the lake, his jaw working as he processed her words. "When I was 25, Ryan said finally, his voice low, "I was engaged to a woman named Catherine. She came from a good family, had the right education, moved in the right social circles. My grandfather approved, everyone approved, we were supposed to be perfect together." Natalie listened, surprised by this revelation. He had never mentioned an engagement before. "But the closer we got to the wedding, the more I realized something was wrong. Catherine liked the idea of being married to Ryan Harding, heir to a fortune. She liked what I could give her, the lifestyle, the status, the security, but she did not actually like me. She did not care about what I thought or felt or wanted. She just cared about what I could provide." He turned to look at Natalie, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her breath catch. "I called off the engagement 3 weeks before the wedding. It was messy and expensive and embarrassing for everyone involved. And I told myself that was it, that I was done trying to find someone who would see me as a person instead of a bank account. I built walls, kept everyone at a safe distance, convinced myself I was better off alone." He shifted closer to her on the bench, his eyes never leaving hers. "Then I saw you sitting in the rain, eating cold food like you did not deserve anything better. And something about that image, about your quiet dignity in the face of suffering, broke something open inside me. And the more I got to know you, the more I realized you are everything Catherine was not. You do not care about my money or my status. You care about doing good work, about taking care of your son, about treating people with kindness even when they do not deserve it. You see me, Natalie. You see the person, not the fortune, and that is so rare, so precious that I cannot let it go without fighting for it." He reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and strong around hers. "So yes, I am serious about you, about us, about Daniel. I do not know exactly what the future looks like, and I cannot promise everything will be easy. But I can promise that if you give me a chance, I will do everything in my power to be worthy of that trust. I will be patient with Daniel, let him set the pace for how involved I get in his life. I will respect your role as his mother and never try to overstep. And I will never, ever take you for granted or treat you as anything less than the extraordinary woman you are." Natalie felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I am scared," she whispered. "I am so scared of getting this wrong, of hurting Daniel, of losing everything again." "I am scared too," Ryan admitted. "But I think the only thing scarier than taking this risk would be not taking it, not seeing where this could go, not giving ourselves the chance to be happy together." "What about work?" Natalie asked. "How do we handle the fact that I work for you? People will talk. They will say I am using you, or you are taking advantage of me, or—" "Let them talk," Ryan interrupted gently. "I do not care what people say, but if it makes you more comfortable, we can adjust your employment situation. You could work directly for my grandfather with no reporting relationship to me. Or we could find you a different position entirely, something that uses your nursing skills but is not connected to the family business. There are solutions, Natalie, we just have to be willing to find them. Natalie looked down at their joined hands, at the way his thumb was making small circles on her palm, soothing and grounding. She thought about Daniel's words about how he just wanted her to be happy. She thought about Rachel's advice about letting herself live instead of just survive. And she thought about her own heart, which had already made its choice weeks ago and was just waiting for her to be brave enough to follow. "Okay," she said finally, looking up to meet his eyes. "Okay, let us try this, let us see where it goes, but we take it slow, especially with Daniel. No rushing, no pushing, just seeing how it feels as we go." The smile that broke across Ryan's face was like sunrise, transforming his usually serious expression into something warm and open and achingly beautiful. "Slow, I can do slow, as long as I get to do it with you." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, a gesture so sweet and old-fashioned that it made her heart melt. Then he let go and stood up, offering her his hand. "Walk with me," he asked. She took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. They started down the path that circled the lake, their fingers still intertwined, and for the first time in longer than Natalie could remember, she felt light, like a weight she had been carrying for years had finally lifted, leaving her free to just be. They talked as they walked about everything and nothing. Ryan told her about his childhood in the mansion, about the pressure of being the heir to a family fortune, about his love of building things and solving problems. Natalie told him about her dreams of finishing nursing school, about the small joys she found in caring for his grandfather, about her hopes for Daniel's future once he was healthy again. "When can I meet him?" Ryan asked. "Officially, I mean, as someone in your life, not just as an employer." "Soon," Natalie promised. "He already knows about you, actually. I talked to him about the possibility of me having someone special in my life. He is a very wise 7-year-old. Takes after his mother," Ryan said with a small smile. They walked for over an hour, watching the sun sink lower in the sky, painting the water gold and orange. Eventually, they circled back to where they had started, neither wanting the afternoon to end but knowing they both had responsibilities waiting. "I should get back to Rachel's," Natalie said reluctantly. "Daniel will be wondering where I am." "When are you coming back to the mansion?" Ryan asked. "Tomorrow. I have been away from work for 3 days already. Your grandfather is probably going crazy without his medication schedule being properly managed." "He has actually been fine," Ryan admitted. "Helen has been filling in, but he does miss you. He told me yesterday that the house feels empty without your laugh in it." Natalie felt warmth spread through her chest. "He said that." "He did. He has gotten very attached to you. We both have." They stood by Natalie's car, neither wanting to say goodbye. Finally, Ryan reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. "Can I kiss you?" he asked softly. "Or is that moving too fast?" Natalie's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew she should say it was too fast, that they should take more time. But she also knew she had been waiting for this moment since the night he found her in the rain, and she was tired of denying what she wanted. "Yes," she whispered, "you can kiss me." Ryan smiled and leaned down, giving her plenty of time to change her mind. But she did not want to change her mind. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted to know what it felt like to be kissed by someone who truly saw her and valued her. His lips met hers gently, carefully, a question rather than a demand. Natalie answered by rising on her toes and kissing him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. The kiss deepened slightly, sweet and tender and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. "Wow," Natalie murmured. "Yeah," Ryan agreed, his forehead resting against hers. "Wow." They stood like that for another moment, then reluctantly separated. Natalie got into her car and Ryan closed the door for her, his hand lingering on the window frame. "Drive safe," he said. "Text me when you get there so I know you made it okay." "I will, and Ryan, thank you for everything, for seeing me, for believing me, for giving me a reason to hope again." "Thank you for being brave enough to take a chance on me," Ryan replied. "I will not let you down, I promise." As Natalie drove away, she kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching Ryan stand in the parking lot until she turned the corner and he disappeared from view. Her lips still tingled from the kiss, and her heart felt fuller than it had in years. She had taken the risk, made the choice, stepped into the unknown, and instead of falling, she felt like she was flying. When she got back to Rachel's apartment, her sister took one look at her face and started grinning. "So I take it the talk went well." "It went really well," Natalie admitted, unable to keep the smile off her face. "Tell me everything," Rachel demanded, pulling her to the couch. So Natalie did. She told her about the conversation, about Ryan's vulnerability, about his promise to take things slow, about the kiss that had made her knees weak. Rachel listened with growing delight, occasionally squealing with excitement. "I knew it," Rachel said when Natalie finished. "I knew from the way you talked about him that this was something special. I am so happy for you, Nat. You deserve this. You deserve someone who sees how amazing you are." Daniel appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He had been napping, worn out from his morning treatment. "Mommy, you are back." "I am back, baby," Natalie said, opening her arms. He climbed onto her lap, snuggling against her chest. "Did you see Mr. Ryan?" he asked sleepily. "I did. Is he going to be your boyfriend now?" Natalie exchanged a glance with Rachel, who was trying not to laugh. "Maybe, would that be okay?" Daniel nodded against her shoulder. "As long as he is nice to you. If he is mean, I will protect you. I am getting bigger and stronger." "You are," Natalie agreed, holding him tight. "You are my brave, strong boy, and yes, Mr. Ryan is very nice to me. You will get to meet him soon and see for yourself." "Okay," Daniel said, already drifting back towards sleep. "Love you, Mommy." "Love you too, baby, so much." The next morning, Natalie returned to the mansion with Daniel. Ryan had arranged for a room to be prepared for him on the same floor as Natalie's quarters, decorated in blues and greens with space for his toys and books. It was temporary, just for visits, until Daniel finished his treatment and could move in permanently. But seeing her son's face light up when he saw the room made Natalie's heart swell. Nathan Harding met them in the hallway, leaning on his cane, his weathered face breaking into a genuine smile when he saw Daniel. "So you are the young man I have been hearing so much about," Nathan said, lowering himself carefully to Daniel's level. "Your mother tells me you are quite the card player." Daniel nodded shyly. "I know how to play Go Fish and Crazy Eights." "Well, I happen to be an expert at both," Nathan said seriously. "Perhaps later you could teach me some of your strategies." "Really?" Daniel's eyes went wide. "Really? Now why do you not go explore your new room while I borrow your mother for a moment? Ryan is waiting in the garden to show you the tree house if you want to find him." Daniel looked at Natalie for permission. She nodded, and he took off down the hallway with the energy only a 7-year-old could muster despite being chronically ill. When he was gone, Nathan turned to Natalie with knowing eyes. "My grandson is happier than I have seen him in years. I have you to thank for that." Natalie felt her cheeks heat. "I think we are making each other happy, Mr. Harding." "Nathan, please, and I want you to know you have my full support. Ryan has been alone too long, hiding behind his work and his walls. You brought him back to life. That is no small thing." "He brought me back to life too," Natalie said softly. "I was just existing before I came here. Now I feel like I am actually living again." Nathan patted her hand. "Good, you both deserve that. Now go on, go find them in the garden. Ryan had the old tree house renovated last week. I suspect Daniel will love it." Natalie made her way through the mansion and out to the gardens, following the sound of voices and laughter. She found Ryan and Daniel sitting on a bench beneath an enormous oak tree, Daniel chattering excitedly about something while Ryan listened with genuine interest. When Ryan saw her approaching, his whole face lit up in a way that made her stomach flip. "Mommy, look," Daniel called, pointing up into the tree. "Mr. Ryan built me a tree house. Can I go up?" "If Mr. Ryan says it is safe," Natalie said, joining them on the bench. "It is completely safe," Ryan assured her. "I had it inspected and reinforced. There is a rope ladder and a safety rail. Want to try it out, buddy?" Daniel was already scrambling toward the ladder. Ryan stood and spotted him as he climbed, making sure he made it safely to the platform above. Once Daniel was settled in the treehouse, exclaiming over the view and the small telescope mounted in the corner, Ryan sat back down next to Natalie, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You built him a treehouse," Natalie said softly. "I remembered you saying he loved to climb before he got sick. I thought maybe having a safe place to climb would make him feel more like a normal kid again." Ryan looked almost embarrassed. "Was that okay? I should have asked you first." "It is more than okay," Natalie said, blinking back tears. "It is perfect, thank you." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Daniel explore his new domain. Then Natalie felt Ryan's hand find hers, their fingers intertwining naturally, as if they had been holding hands for years instead of just starting this journey together. "I talked to my attorney this morning," Ryan said quietly, "about adjusting your employment situation. We worked out an arrangement where you will work directly for my grandfather's personal foundation, managing his medical care and some of his charitable work. It removes any reporting relationship between us and puts you on equal footing professionally." "You did not have to do that," Natalie said. "I wanted to. I want to remove any question about the appropriateness of our relationship. I want people to see that this is real, that we are equals choosing to be together, not an employer and employee in an unbalanced power dynamic." Natalie squeezed his hand. "Thank you for thinking of that, for protecting both of us." "Always," Ryan promised. "I will always protect you and Daniel. That is my job now, if you will let me." "I will let you," Natalie said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "But you have to let me protect you too. This is a partnership, not a rescue." "Deal," Ryan said, kissing the top of her head. Above them, Daniel called down from the tree house. "Hey, Mommy, Mr. Ryan, can you see me waving?" They both looked up and waved back, laughing at his enthusiasm. And in that moment, sitting in the garden with the man she was falling in love with and her son playing safely above them, Natalie felt something she had not felt in years. Peace. Complete, total peace. The weeks that followed were like living in a beautiful dream. Ryan was true to his word about taking things slowly, especially with Daniel. He did not push for more time than Natalie was comfortable giving, did not try to rush into anything. Instead, he let the relationship develop naturally, building trust and connection day by day. He joined them for dinner twice a week, always bringing something small for Daniel, a book or a puzzle or a toy that showed he had been paying attention to the boy's interests. He came to Daniel's treatment appointments when Natalie wanted company, sitting in the waiting room with a hand to hold when the anxiety got too much. He taught Daniel how to play chess, how to identify birds in the garden, how to skip stones across the lake in the park. And slowly, carefully, Daniel began to open up to him. He started calling him Ryan instead of Mr. Ryan. He asked questions about Ryan's work, his childhood, his interests. He showed Ryan his drawings and his favorite books. And one day, about 6 weeks into their relationship, Daniel fell asleep during a movie they were watching together, his head pillowed on Ryan's shoulder, completely trusting and content. Natalie, watching from the other end of the couch, felt her heart expand to a size she had not known was possible. This was what she had been afraid to hope for. A partner who loved her son almost as much as she did. Someone who made their little family feel complete instead of broken. Ryan, feeling her watching, looked over and mouthed, "Is this okay?" She nodded, tears in her eyes, and mouthed back, "It is perfect." That night, after they had carried Daniel to bed and tucked him in, Natalie and Ryan stood in the hallway outside her room, neither quite ready to say goodnight. "He is amazing," Ryan said softly. "You have raised an incredible kid, Natalie." "We are raising him now," Natalie corrected. "If you want to be, if you are ready for that." Ryan cupped her face in his hands, his gray eyes intense. "I have never been more ready for anything in my life. I love him, Natalie, and I love you. I know it has only been a couple months and maybe it is too soon to say it, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. I am in love with you." Natalie felt tears spill over, but they were happy tears, joyful tears. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I started falling for you that night in the rain when you gave me an umbrella and made me feel like I mattered, and I have been falling ever since." Ryan kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. And when they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling through their tears. "Move in with me," Ryan said suddenly. "Not as an employee, as my partner, you and Daniel. Make this your home, not just a place where you work. Let me be part of your family for real." "Yes," Natalie said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." 3 months later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Daniel's doctor delivered the news they had been praying for. The leukemia was in remission. Daniel would need continued monitoring and follow-up treatments, but the cancer was gone. He was going to be okay. Natalie collapsed into Ryan's arms in the doctor's office, sobbing with relief and gratitude and overwhelming joy. Ryan held her tight, his own tears mixing with hers, whispering thank you over and over into her hair. That night, They had a celebration dinner in the mansion's formal dining room. Nathan had insisted on it, inviting the entire household staff to join them. Maria cooked Daniel's favorite foods. Helen decorated with balloons and streamers. David, the butler, made a toast about courage and hope and family. And sitting at that long table, surrounded by people who had become family, holding Ryan's hand on one side and Daniel's on the other, Natalie realized that everything she had been through, all the pain and struggle and despair, had led her to this moment. To this home, this man, this life that felt almost too good to be true but was somehow miraculously real. Ryan leaned over and whispered in her ear, "Happy." "Happier than I ever thought possible," Natalie whispered back. "Good, because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." As the celebration continued around them, as Daniel laughed at something Nathan said and Maria brought out a cake with 7 candles, Natalie looked at Ryan and saw her future. Not a perfect future, because life was never perfect, but a real future full of love and partnership and possibility. She had been a maid eating in the rain, invisible and forgotten. And he had been a billionaire locked behind walls of his own making, afraid to let anyone close, but somehow they had found each other. Somehow they had been brave enough to take a chance, and that bravery had given them something neither had thought they would ever have again. Hope, love, home. And as the evening wore on and the stars came out above the mansion's gardens, Natalie knew that this was just the beginning. The beginning of a life she would build with Ryan and Daniel, a life full of joy and challenges and growth and love. A life that had started with a moment of despair but had transformed into something beautiful. Because sometimes, when you are at your lowest point, when you are sitting in the rain eating cold food and thinking you have nothing left, that is exactly when life decides to surprise you. That is when someone sees you, really sees you, and everything changes. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, that person loves you back. That person becomes your partner, your home, your future. That person awakens your heart and reminds you that no matter how dark things get, there is always hope, always the possibility of tomorrow being better than today. Always the chance that love, real love, is just around the corner, waiting for you to be brave enough to reach for it. The end. Thank you for following Natalie and Ryan's journey. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to this channel to support our growth and help us bring you more inspiring tales of hope, love, and second chances. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that even in our darkest moments, transformation is possible. What was your favorite part of the story? Drop a comment below and let us know. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin when we are brave enough to believe we deserve happiness.